The quietest soul in the castle was about to become the one every royal wolf refused to leave behind. Long before sunrise painted the eastern towers with pale gold, Emily Brooks was already awake. The castle kitchens never truly slept, and neither did the young Omega who worked behind their heavy oak doors. While nobles dreamed beneath velvet canopies and servants hurried through polished corridors, Emily quietly tied her cream-colored apron, gathered fresh vegetables from woven baskets, and lit the first fire beneath the great iron stoves. Warm orange light flickered across rows of copper pots hanging from wooden beams, filling the vast kitchen with the comforting scent of fresh bread, rosemary, cinnamon, and simmering broth. She moved with practiced grace, speaking little, never asking for praise, and always finishing the tasks no one else wanted. Most of the other kitchen workers barely noticed her unless another chore needed to be done. Some believed her quiet nature meant weakness. Others simply forgot she was standing there at all. Emily never argued. She only smiled gently, lowered her eyes, and continued working. Every morning, before anyone else entered the kitchen, she secretly set aside small pieces of leftover bread, bits of roasted chicken, and fresh vegetables that would otherwise be discarded. After completing her earliest duties, she slipped outside through the narrow back door leading to the herb garden behind the kitchens. There, tiny birds hopped across the stone path, eager squirrels waited beneath old oak branches, and several stray dogs wagged their tails the moment they saw her. Emily laughed softly as she scattered crumbs across the grass. "Everyone deserves breakfast," she whispered with quiet warmth. The animals gathered around her without fear, their peaceful presence becoming the favorite part of her day. She never imagined anyone noticed these small acts of kindness. Hidden several stories above, behind the tall windows of the western tower, a pair of piercing blue eyes quietly watched the peaceful scene unfold. Alexander Sterling, the Alpha King, had returned unexpectedly before dawn after weeks of traveling across the northern borders of his kingdom. He had intended to spend only a moment overlooking the castle grounds before beginning another demanding day of royal duties. Instead, his attention lingered upon the young woman below. She did not know a king was watching. She simply smiled as one elderly stray dog gently rested its head against her hand. Alexander found himself strangely unable to look away. There was something remarkably peaceful about someone who showed compassion when no audience existed. Before long, the distant ringing of the castle bells called him back toward responsibility, and he quietly left the window without another thought. Yet the image remained in his mind far longer than he expected. As evening settled over the castle, dark clouds gathered above the surrounding mountains. Heavy rain began falling shortly after sunset, sending servants rushing through stone corridors while strong winds rattled ancient windows. Emily remained behind after nearly everyone else had gone home, carefully washing the final trays and extinguishing the last cooking fires. When she finally carried a basket of kitchen scraps toward the back garden, she heard an unfamiliar sound beyond the herb beds. It was not loud. It was not frightening. It was little more than a slow, tired breath carried through the falling rain. Emily paused beneath the shelter of the doorway, listening carefully. Beyond the rows of lavender and sage, partially hidden beneath the branches of an old cedar tree, stood an enormous black wolf. Rain soaked its thick fur until it shimmered beneath the dim lantern light. Despite its incredible size, the magnificent animal remained perfectly still. Its piercing blue eyes never left hers. Emily felt her heart race for only a moment before something unexpected replaced her fear. The great wolf did not appear threatening. It appeared exhausted. Without speaking, she slowly set down her basket, picked up a clean linen towel, and took one careful step toward the silent stranger standing alone in the storm. Emily remained perfectly still as the rain whispered through the cedar branches. The enormous black wolf did not growl or step forward. It simply watched her with those remarkably calm blue eyes that seemed almost human beneath the silver glow of the storm clouds. She could see droplets running through its dark fur, and although the animal stood proudly, its breathing was slower than it should have been. Without making any sudden movements, She placed the folded linen towel and a small wooden bowl filled with fresh water several feet away before quietly stepping back. "You do not have to trust me," she said gently. "But you do not have to stay out here alone either." The wolf lowered its head slightly, studying her face instead of the food she had carried outside. Emily smiled with the same kindness she showed every frightened bird and stray dog that wandered into the castle gardens. After several quiet moments, the great wolf finally walked forward with slow, careful steps. It ignored the bread completely, drank only a little water, then paused beside the towel as though considering whether this unfamiliar young woman deserved its trust. Emily noticed a long scratch hidden beneath the thick fur along one shoulder. It did not appear severe, but it explained the careful way the animal shifted its weight. She quietly reached into her apron pocket and removed a small cloth bundle containing dried lavender, clean bandages, and a soothing herbal salve she often prepared for injured animals around the castle grounds. Kneeling several feet away, she gently placed everything on the grass without trying to touch the wolf. "These always help," she whispered. "Use them if you wish." The wolf stared at her for another long moment before doing something that left Emily speechless. It slowly lowered itself onto the wet grass, closed its eyes for only a heartbeat, then rose again with noticeably steadier posture. Before disappearing into the darkness between the ancient trees, it looked back one final time, almost as though memorizing her face. Emily remained beneath the cedar until the forest became silent again. She gathered the empty bowl, smiled softly to herself, and returned to the kitchen, believing she had simply helped another lost creature find shelter. The following morning, the castle buzzed with ordinary routines. Bread baked inside enormous stone ovens, servants hurried through crowded hallways, and cooks prepared meals for visiting nobles. Emily quietly resumed peeling apples and chopping fresh vegetables while conversations drifted around the busy room. No one noticed that she occasionally glanced toward the kitchen windows, wondering whether the mysterious wolf had found a safe place to rest before sunrise. Shortly before noon, one of the younger servants suddenly rushed inside, breathing hard with excitement. "There are wolves outside the western gate," he exclaimed. Every conversation stopped at once. Several cooks exchanged nervous looks, while others hurried toward the nearest windows. Emily looked up in surprise but remained where she was, calmly wiping flour from her hands. Another servant quickly added, "They are not attacking anyone. They are just sitting there." Curious whispers spread through the kitchen like a cool breeze. The captain of the castle guards ordered every entrance carefully watched, yet no alarms were sounded because the wolves showed no sign of aggression. They simply rested beyond the stone walls with remarkable patience. As the afternoon passed, more reports arrived. A pair of wolves had been seen near the royal gardens. 3 others rested quietly beside the northern path. Another stood beneath the old oak overlooking the kitchens without moving for hours. None frightened the horses. None chased the livestock. None approached the villagers. It was as though they had come for only one reason that no one inside the castle could possibly understand. By the 3rd morning, the unusual visitors had become impossible to ignore. Castle guards reported wolves resting near nearly every pathway leading toward the royal kitchens, yet none crossed the invisible line that separated the gardens from the busy stone courtyard. They did not frighten the servants or chase the horses pulling supply wagons. Instead, they simply watched. Their quiet presence transformed ordinary routines into whispered conversations that followed every hallway and staircase. Emily tried her best to ignore the growing excitement around her. She carried baskets of fresh vegetables from the market entrance, stirred large kettles of vegetable soup, kneaded bread dough, and polished serving trays exactly as she always had. Whenever another servant mentioned the mysterious wolves, she smiled politely but returned to her work. She believed someone else would eventually discover the reason for their strange behavior. Surely it had nothing to do with a simple kitchen maid. During the afternoon, she stepped outside to gather fresh rosemary and thyme from the herb garden behind the kitchens. The air smelled wonderfully clean after 2 days of gentle rain, and sunlight filtered through towering oak branches, painting warm patterns across the stone pathway. As she clipped several fragrant stems, she sensed she was no longer alone. Looking toward the old cedar tree, she found the same enormous black wolf standing quietly beneath its spreading branches. Its brilliant blue eyes met hers with calm familiarity. Emily smiled without hesitation. "You came back," she said softly. The wolf remained motionless, its expression steady and peaceful. She noticed the shoulder that had seemed uncomfortable during the storm now appeared much stronger. Relief warmed her heart. "I am glad you are feeling better," she whispered. She carried a small piece of roasted chicken from her apron pocket, placing it gently upon a flat stone before stepping away once again. The wolf walked forward, accepted the offering with quiet dignity, then settled beneath the tree instead of disappearing into the forest. Emily returned to her herbs, believing the magnificent animal simply enjoyed the peaceful garden. High above, hidden behind carved stone arches overlooking the courtyard, Alexander observed the familiar scene without announcing his presence. Since returning to the castle, he had received countless reports from his commanders. The royal pack had abandoned its usual patrol routes. Wolves who normally guarded distant forests had quietly gathered near one small corner of the castle grounds. No commands had been given. No signal had summoned them. They had simply arrived on their own. Alexander understood his wolves better than anyone alive. They never acted without purpose. Watching Emily smile gently at the great black wolf confirmed what had already begun forming in his thoughts. She treated every living creature with the same kindness, whether anyone witnessed it or not. She expected nothing in return. There was no fear in her eyes, only compassion. Behind him, Captain Daniel Hayes approached respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "the council is becoming concerned. They fear the wolves are preparing for something." Alexander never looked away from the garden below. "They already are," he replied calmly. "They are protecting someone." The captain followed his gaze until he spotted Emily gathering herbs while the black wolf rested peacefully only a few yards away. Surprise crossed his face. "The kitchen maid?" Alexander gave the faintest smile. The wolves have never mistaken a good heart. Far below, Emily finished filling her basket and thanked the silent animal as though speaking to an old friend. She never realized that dozens of unseen golden eyes watched from the forest beyond the castle walls, nor did she notice how every wolf quietly rose to its feet the moment she walked back inside. One by one, they shifted position until every path leading toward the royal kitchens was gently, silently, and faithfully guarded. The strange calm surrounding the wolves continued for another 2 days, and by then the entire castle had abandoned ordinary conversation in favor of endless speculation. Servants whispered in crowded hallways, merchants exchanged nervous theories outside the gates, and even veteran guards admitted they had never witnessed anything like it. Every report sounded nearly identical. The wolves appeared at dawn, remained throughout the day, and quietly disappeared after sunset. They harmed no one. They demanded nothing. They simply watched the castle with patient, unwavering attention. Emily knew almost nothing about the growing rumors because her days remained consumed by endless work. That afternoon, the royal kitchens prepared a grand banquet honoring several visiting noble families. Every oven burned at full heat, every countertop overflowed with fresh ingredients, and every servant hurried from one task to another. Emily carried trays of warm bread, polished silver serving dishes until they reflected the candlelight, and carefully arranged fresh herbs across elegant platters. She worked with the same quiet focus she always had, never realizing that dozens of curious eyes occasionally turned toward her before quickly looking away. As the final meal was carried toward the great hall, Emily received one last assignment. She was asked to deliver a basket of fresh pastries through the central courtyard before the evening feast officially began. Balancing the woven basket carefully in both hands, she stepped outside into the cool evening air. The courtyard glowed beneath hundreds of hanging lanterns, their golden light dancing across polished stone walkways and flowering gardens. Noble guests strolled gracefully through the open space, laughing together while musicians quietly performed beside a marble fountain. Emily lowered her gaze as she walked, hoping to pass unnoticed. She had nearly reached the opposite entrance when a clear voice interrupted her path. "Be careful where you're going." Emily immediately stopped. Standing before her was Lady Victoria Ashcombe, one of the kingdom's most influential noblewomen, dressed in an elegant silver gown embroidered with delicate moonflowers. Several other nobles stood nearby, watching with polite curiosity. Emily quickly offered a respectful bow. "I am sorry if I disturbed you, my lady." Lady Victoria glanced briefly at the simple basket before offering a faint smile that never reached her eyes. "You kitchen servants should remember your place during royal gatherings. This courtyard was designed for honored guests, not for those carrying bread." A few quiet laughs spread among the nearby nobles. Emily felt warmth rise into her cheeks, yet she answered gently, "Yes, my lady." She adjusted the basket and attempted to continue walking, but Lady Victoria stepped slightly into her path once more. "Tell me," she said with amused curiosity, "is it true the wolves spend their days outside your kitchen because they smell leftovers?" More laughter followed. Emily lowered her eyes once again. "I do not know why they come." Before another word could be spoken, an unexpected silence settled across the courtyard. The musicians stopped playing. Conversations faded away. Even the evening breeze seemed to pause. One by one, majestic wolves emerged from every surrounding pathway. They walked with perfect calm across the polished stone, their movements graceful and unhurried. There was no growling, no rushing, no fear. They simply approached until they formed a wide, peaceful circle around Emily. The enormous black wolf stepped quietly to the front and sat beside her without taking its eyes from the surrounding crowd. Dozens more wolves mirrored the same calm posture, creating a living wall of silent loyalty. No one dared move. Guards instinctively reached for their swords, but hesitated when every wolf remained perfectly relaxed. Emily looked around in complete disbelief, her hands still holding the basket of warm pastries. She slowly looked down at the great black wolf beside her. It lifted its head toward her with the same calm blue eyes she remembered beneath the cedar tree, as though reassuring her that she had nothing to fear. Across the courtyard, every noble stood speechless, unable to understand why the royal pack had chosen to surround the quiet kitchen maid with such unmistakable devotion. No one spoke. The only sound in the courtyard was the gentle rustling of leaves above the silent gathering of wolves. Emily remained frozen where she stood, the basket of warm pastries still resting in her trembling hands. She looked from one calm face to another, unable to understand why every magnificent creature seemed focused entirely on her. The great black wolf beside her never moved. Its steady blue eyes remained watchful, not with suspicion, but with quiet certainty. The circle around her was neither threatening nor aggressive. It was unmistakably protective. Then another silence settled over the courtyard, even deeper than the first. The massive oak doors leading into the great hall slowly opened. Every servant immediately lowered their head. Noble guests stepped aside without being asked. Alexander Sterling walked into the fading evening light with the calm confidence of someone who never needed to announce his authority. His dark royal cloak moved gently with the breeze, and the golden crest upon his jacket reflected the lantern light as he crossed the courtyard. Emily had only seen the Alpha King from a distance before. Like everyone else in the castle, she respectfully bowed her head the moment she recognized him. Alexander continued walking until he stood only a few feet from the great black wolf. For a brief moment, the entire courtyard seemed to hold its breath. Then the impossible happened. The enormous wolf quietly lowered its head before him. One after another, every wolf surrounding Emily followed the same gesture until the entire royal pack bowed in perfect harmony. Soft gasps spread through the watching crowd. Captain Daniel Hayes lowered his eyes with quiet respect while several nobles exchanged astonished glances. Emily slowly looked up, her heart racing. She finally understood what no one else had dared imagine. The wolf she had met beneath the cedar tree belonged to the Alpha King. Before she could gather her thoughts, another figure stepped forward from the entrance of the great hall. Moon Priestess Miriam wore flowing white robes embroidered with silver symbols that shimmered beneath the lantern light. Her expression remained peaceful as she approached the gathered wolves. She studied Emily for a long moment before smiling with unmistakable warmth. The ancient bond has awakened once again, she said softly, her voice carrying effortlessly across the silent courtyard. Confused whispers spread among the nobles. One council member stepped forward. "Ancient bond?" he asked. The priestess nodded gently. Long before this castle was built, the royal pack made a promise beneath the moon. They would forever recognize hearts that choose kindness when no reward is expected. Such hearts cannot command wolves.
They do not need to.
Compassion itself becomes the invitation. Emily stared at the priestess in disbelief. "There must be some mistake," she said quietly. "I have done nothing special." Miriam's smile grew warmer. "That is exactly why they came." Alexander finally spoke, his calm voice carrying quiet strength instead of ceremony. "Several nights ago, during the storm, you found an injured wolf behind the kitchens." Emily slowly nodded. "I only offered water, clean cloth, and herbs." "You never asked whose wolf it was," Alexander continued. "You never looked for praise. You never expected anything in return." Emily looked toward the great black wolf standing peacefully beside her. Memories of the rainy night returned with startling clarity. The familiar blue eyes, the patient silence, the quiet dignity. Her eyes widened with sudden realization. Alexander gave the slightest nod. "You believed you were helping one lonely animal," he said. "In truth, you showed kindness to the guardian of the royal pack." Emily looked at the magnificent wolf once more. It gently stepped closer before lowering its head beside her shoulder exactly as it had beneath the cedar tree. Around the courtyard, every royal wolf remained peacefully seated, their silent devotion answering every question long before anyone found the words to ask them. The courtyard remained silent long after the moon priestess finished speaking. Emily could still feel every pair of eyes resting upon her, yet she wished she could quietly return to the warmth of the royal kitchens and continue preparing tomorrow's bread as though nothing extraordinary had happened. She lowered her gaze toward the basket she still carried, almost embarrassed that such an ordinary task had become the center of so much attention. The wolves, however, never moved away. They remained peacefully seated around her, patient and composed, as though protecting her was the most natural responsibility they had ever known. The silence finally broke when one of the senior members of the royal council stepped forward. Lord Edmund Carlisle was respected throughout the kingdom for his knowledge of ancient law, but his expression carried unmistakable concern. He bowed respectfully toward Alexander before speaking. "Your Majesty, no one questions the wisdom of the royal pack. However, tradition has guided this kingdom for centuries. If word spreads that the wolves have chosen an ordinary kitchen servant, confusion will follow. The people will expect answers that we may not be prepared to give." Several nobles nodded in quiet agreement. Emily immediately stepped forward, gently holding the basket against her apron. "Please," she said softly. "If I have caused trouble, I never intended to. I do not wish to become the reason people argue." Alexander looked toward her, his expression calm and reassuring. "You have caused nothing except kindness," he replied. "The rest belongs to those who choose how they respond to it." Moon Priestess Miriam slowly approached the center of the courtyard. She reached down and gently rested one hand upon the head of the great black wolf, which remained perfectly still beneath her touch. "Many people believe the royal pack exists to defend the throne," she said. "That is only part of the truth. Their oldest promise is older than the crown itself. They recognize compassion long before titles, wealth, or family names. They have never confused status with character." The gathered nobles listened carefully as the evening breeze carried her quiet voice across the lantern-lit courtyard. "Power may command obedience," Miriam continued. "But only genuine kindness earns willing loyalty. That lesson has not changed in hundreds of years." Emily stood speechless. She remembered every small act she had considered ordinary. Saving scraps of bread for hungry animals, caring for injured birds, leaving bowls of fresh water during the hottest days of summer, offering herbs to a lonely wolf beneath a cedar tree during a storm. None of those moments had seemed important at the time. She had never imagined they were being witnessed by anyone beyond the creatures she hoped to help. Captain Daniel Hayes stepped closer to Alexander and quietly asked, "What are your orders for the royal pack, Your Majesty?" Alexander looked around the peaceful circle of wolves before answering with a faint smile. "I have given none." The captain blinked in surprise. "Then how shall we direct them?" Alexander slowly shook his head. "You cannot direct gratitude. You cannot command trust. They have already made their decision." As though understanding every word, the great black wolf calmly stood and walked to Emily's side once again. One after another, the remaining wolves followed, not crowding her, not frightening anyone, but quietly forming their familiar circle with graceful discipline. Emily looked from one gentle face to another. Overwhelmed by a devotion she felt she had done nothing to deserve. She whispered almost to herself, "I only wanted to help." Alexander heard her and answered with quiet certainty. Sometimes the smallest kindness reaches farther than the greatest display of strength. As the castle bells rang softly across the evening sky, the wolves remained exactly where they had chosen to be, and for the first time in generations, everyone gathered in the royal courtyard witnessed a truth that no law, title, or tradition could explain away. The heart of the kingdom had never been measured by power alone. The morning after the extraordinary gathering, the castle awoke to an unfamiliar kind of silence. There were no frightened rumors echoing through the corridors anymore. Instead, there was quiet curiosity. Servants opened windows expecting the wolves to have vanished during the night, yet they discovered something even more remarkable. Every member of the royal pack had calmly left the grand courtyard before sunrise. They had not returned to the forests beyond the kingdom. They had gathered outside the royal kitchens. Emily arrived before dawn as she always did, carrying a small basket filled with fresh herbs from the castle garden. As she rounded the final stone corner leading toward the kitchen entrance, she stopped in complete astonishment. Nearly 24 wolves rested peacefully beside the pathway. Some lay beneath flowering trees while others sat beside the herb beds, their calm golden and blue eyes quietly following her arrival. The great black wolf stood first. It walked toward her with slow, graceful steps before sitting beside the kitchen door as though waiting to escort her inside. Emily looked around in disbelief. "You should all be in the forest," she whispered with a gentle smile. Several nearby servants had already stopped working to watch the extraordinary scene unfold. One young baker cautiously stepped outside carrying a tray of warm bread. The wolves did not react to him at all. Their attention remained entirely on Emily. She slowly opened the heavy kitchen door, and only after she safely entered did the great black wolf settle beside the entrance, once again. Throughout the morning, the unusual pattern continued. Whenever Emily carried vegetables from the storage house, several wolves quietly walked behind her before returning to their places outside the kitchen. When she visited the herb garden, they patiently rested nearby without interrupting her work. They never entered the building. They never frightened anyone. They simply remained close enough to ensure she was never alone. The story spread through the castle faster than any messenger could have carried it. By midday, nobles gathered discreetly along upper balconies to witness the impossible with their own eyes. Lord Edmund Carlisle frowned thoughtfully as he watched from the western gallery. "They are not obeying commands," he murmured. Captain Daniel Hayes nodded. "No one has given them any." Alexander stood beside them in silence. His expression revealed neither surprise nor concern. Deep inside, he already understood what the council still struggled to accept. The royal pack had not selected Emily because of a royal decree. They had chosen her because they trusted her heart completely. Later that afternoon, the royal council assembled in the Hall of Moonstone for an emergency meeting. Voices remained respectful, yet the uncertainty inside the chamber was unmistakable. Some feared the kingdom would misunderstand the meaning of the ancient bond. Others worried that centuries of tradition would be questioned. When everyone had spoken, Alexander finally rose from his chair. The room immediately became silent. "You believe the wolves have created a problem," he said calmly. "I believe they have revealed a truth." His eyes moved across every council member. Emily Brooks has not asked for influence. She has not asked for recognition. She continues preparing meals exactly as she did before anyone noticed her name. The only thing that has changed is that the royal pack has reminded us that goodness exists whether powerful people choose to acknowledge it or not. No one interrupted him. Even Lord Edmund lowered his eyes in thoughtful silence. At that very moment, completely unaware of the discussion unfolding across the castle, Emily placed fresh cinnamon rolls onto cooling racks before quietly carrying bowls of clean water outside for the waiting wolves. They accepted nothing more than her gentle smile and peaceful presence. Watching from a nearby balcony, Alexander saw the great black wolf softly lower its head as Emily thanked every animal as though each were an honored guest instead of a guardian. In that quiet moment, he realized the kingdom was not witnessing the loyalty of wolves alone. It was witnessing kindness leading where authority never could. Within a week, the atmosphere inside the castle had changed in ways no royal decree could have accomplished. Servants who had once hurried past Emily without a greeting now paused to wish her a pleasant morning. The head baker quietly began saving the freshest herbs for her recipes, and even the busiest kitchen workers found themselves asking whether she needed an extra pair of hands before beginning their own assignments. Emily accepted every gesture with the same gentle smile she had always worn, never allowing the unexpected attention to change the quiet rhythm of her days. She still arrived before sunrise, still lit the ovens, still prepared bread for the palace, and still carried bowls of fresh water outside for the patient wolves waiting beneath the old trees. Their presence had become so constant that the younger servants no longer reacted with fear. Children visiting the castle with their families often stood at a respectful distance, smiling with amazement as the majestic animals rested peacefully near the kitchen gardens. One bright afternoon, Alexander invited the royal council, Moon Priestess Miriam, Captain Daniel Hayes, and several respected noble families to gather in the castle courtyard. Word spread quickly, and before long the open square filled with curious faces. Emily was quietly arranging baskets of freshly baked bread for the evening meal when she received an unexpected message requesting her presence. Believing someone needed assistance, she carefully removed her apron, brushed a little flour from her sleeves, and walked toward the courtyard with humble uncertainty. The moment she stepped through the stone archway, every wolf resting throughout the castle grounds calmly rose to its feet. Without haste and without a single command, they walked toward the courtyard from every direction. The crowd instinctively stepped aside, creating a wide path as the royal pack gathered around Emily once more. They did not surround her as a barrier this time. Instead, they formed a graceful semicircle beside and behind her, facing the assembled kingdom with quiet dignity. Alexander stepped forward, his calm expression carrying both kindness and quiet authority. He looked first at Emily, then toward every person standing in the courtyard. "Today," he began, "I will not announce a new title, create a new law, or reward someone with riches. None of those things are necessary." His voice remained steady as it echoed across the silent gathering. Emily Brooks has reminded this kingdom that the smallest acts of compassion often shape the greatest futures. She did not seek recognition. She did not ask for favor. She simply chose kindness when no one believed anyone was watching. He turned fully toward Emily. "You will remain exactly where you have chosen to serve, because your value has never depended upon rank. However, from this day forward, every person within these walls will show you the same respect that the royal pack has already shown you." Lord Edmund Carlisle slowly stepped forward and bowed his head to Emily with genuine sincerity. One by one, the remaining council members followed. Lady Victoria Ashcombe, whose careless words had once embarrassed the quiet kitchen maid before the entire courtyard, approached with visible humility. "Miss Brooks," she said softly, "I judged you without understanding your heart. I hope you will accept my apology." Emily smiled with gentle warmth. "There is nothing to forgive," she answered. "Kindness grows best when it is shared." Moon Priestess Miriam watched the exchange with peaceful satisfaction while the great black wolf quietly rested beside Emily's shoulder. Around the courtyard, smiles slowly replaced uncertainty. The lesson no longer belonged only to the royal pack. It belonged to the entire kingdom. Alexander looked toward the wolves, then back at the people gathered before him. Without speaking another word, He understood the transformation had already begun. Respect had not been forced through authority. It had been inspired by one ordinary young woman whose quiet compassion had become stronger than every title carried within the castle walls. Months passed, and the remarkable events that had once filled the castle with astonishment gradually became part of everyday life. Visitors arriving from distant villages often expected to hear stories about the Alpha King, the magnificent royal pack, or the ancient traditions of the kingdom. Instead, they were quietly led toward the royal kitchens, where the most unforgettable story unfolded each morning before the first loaf of bread ever reached the ovens. Emily Brooks still arrived before sunrise carrying the same woven basket filled with fresh herbs gathered from the castle garden. She still tied the same simple apron around her waist, greeted every servant with a warm smile, and quietly began preparing breakfast for hundreds of people without asking for recognition. The difference was not in her routine. The difference was in the way everyone else now saw her. Young kitchen apprentices eagerly learned beside her, not because she held authority, but because they admired the patience with which she taught every lesson. Senior cooks sought her opinion before creating new recipes, trusting her quiet wisdom more than loud confidence. Servants who once hurried past without noticing her now paused each morning to wish her a peaceful day. Respect had become as natural as breathing, not because anyone had been ordered to offer it, but because kindness had quietly transformed the hearts around her. Outside the kitchen, the familiar sight remained unchanged. Several royal wolves rested peacefully beneath the flowering trees while others lounged beside the herb garden, lifting their heads whenever Emily stepped outdoors with fresh bowls of water or baskets of leftover bread for the birds and woodland animals. Castle visitors no longer viewed the wolves with fear. Children laughed softly as they watched colorful birds gather only a few feet away from the calm guardians. Families often remarked that nowhere in the kingdom felt more welcoming than the little path leading to the kitchens. Alexander found himself visiting that path more often than he ever expected. Whenever the demands of leadership became overwhelming, he quietly slipped away from council meetings and formal banquets to spend a few peaceful moments near the warmth of the ovens. Emily always greeted him exactly as she greeted everyone else, offering a fresh cup of tea or a slice of warm bread with genuine kindness rather than ceremony. Those simple conversations, free from titles and expectations, became the calmest moments of his day. Moon Priestess Miriam occasionally smiled as she watched from the garden, knowing the ancient bond had fulfilled its purpose once again. It had never existed to elevate one person above another. It existed to remind every generation that true greatness could appear in the most ordinary places. One cool autumn morning, Emily stepped outside just as golden sunlight spread across the castle grounds. The great black wolf quietly approached and sat beside her, gazing toward the awakening kingdom. Emily gently rested her hand upon its broad shoulder and smiled as birds circled overhead and the scent of fresh bread drifted through the crisp morning air. Around them, the other wolves rested peacefully, perfectly content simply to remain near the one person who had offered kindness without expecting anything in return. Alexander joined her a few moments later, standing beside them in comfortable silence as the castle slowly came to life. No speeches were needed. No ceremonies remained to be held. The greatest change had already happened long ago, beginning with a single quiet decision beneath a cedar tree during a rainy night. Looking across the peaceful courtyard, Alexander realized that kingdoms were not remembered only for their castles, their crowns, or even their kings. They were remembered for the values they chose to protect. And in this kingdom, the strongest force had never been fear, power, or tradition. It had been the quiet courage of one humble heart that treated every living creature with compassion. That simple kindness had inspired loyalty no command could ever demand, changed minds no argument could ever persuade, and left behind a legacy that would be told for generations whenever someone wondered what true strength really looked like. It looked remarkably gentle.